Coming up on the disturbance, I gotta tell you, the National Football League executives, they're up to it yet again. This time they give us their rankings of the NFC conference. I've got all 16 positions, and let's just say they got a whole lot wrong. It's like these NFC executives are like that old man from the Scooby-Doo show that used to say, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those darn kids. I've got that plus the total and utter complete disrespect of Matt Nagy, the head coach of the Chicago Bears and the entire Chicago Bears organization by the rest of the NFL executives. I've got all of that, and trust me, a whole lot more coming up on the big show today.
Live and on tape from the heart of Silicon Valley, this is The Disturbance, hosted by Dave Daba. Now to the host, who can't stop ripping on players, coaches, and unbelievably bad front office management, Dave Daba.
It is Saturday, September 4th of the year 2021. I'm Dave Daba, and thanks so much for tuning in to The Disturbance today. Now, we've got a really interesting show for you today. We're going to talk about this ridiculous list that these NFL executives put together. At the end of the show, we're going to get into the total and utter and complete disrespect of Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears. Like, did these NFL executives forget to notice that the best rookie quarterback in the preseason, the best rookie quarterback in OTAs, and the best rookie quarterback drafted happened to be drafted and is playing for the Chicago Bears in one Justin Fields? But first, let's deep dive into this list. Now, when you first look at this list, the way I did, I went straight to the bottom. I saw Detroit at the bottom and I said, okay, this list has hope. But then I saw the Giants, which is a vastly improved football team. And then I saw the Bears at 14, and it completely delegitimized the list for me, and it should for you as well. Then at the top of the list, and we put this list up for everybody to see it who's watching this on the big YouTube simulcast. We've got the Buccaneers and Packers at 1 and 2, which makes a lot of sense. Deep diving into this list is sort of what we're going to do a little bit today. Look, I'm not going to talk about the Falcons. I'm not going to talk about Sam Darnold and the Panthers. And who's the Eagles quarterback? I mean, who's the Eagles quarterback? Will the Eagles quarterback have a stomach flu every week? I'm just asking. Jalen Hurts. Then at number 10, you've got the Washington football team and the Cardinals at 9. On the other side of the ball, if you will. Now, where I have some issues with this list is in a couple different places. Now, I just bear with me for a second here. The Los Angeles Rams. We use the term great coach too often in sports, and we all, and I'm guilty of this, have talked about Sean McVay, about how Sean McVay is one of the great young coaches in the National Football League today. But is he really? Look, Mike Tomlin's won a Super Bowl, but Mike Tomlin hasn't won 3 Super Bowls. All Sean McVay has done is he improved a mediocre quarterback in Jared Goff and turned him into something a little bit better than average. And he took the Rams to the Super Bowl 1 year. That is all Sean McVay has done. So I think Sean McVay is a really good coach. I like what the Rams have on their team. But there is a big issue here. And that issue with the Rams has to be at their quarterback position. Now, look, I love Matthew Stafford. But do you know what I love more than Matthew Stafford? I love Matthew Stafford 5 years ago. Hell, I love Matthew Stafford 3 years ago. Look, Matthew Stafford is on a ski slope somewhere right now with Andy Dalton, and they are both skiing down the backside of Career Mountain. Dallas, Chicago. I am just simply saying that Matthew Stafford is not going to last an entire season. Can you tell me who the backup quarterback is and how many games the backup quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams has actually played in the National Football League? Look, I have to say this. The Rams' offensive line is beat up. It's not as strong as it was last year. They've already lost their starting running back during preseason. They already made a trade for Sony Michel. I really like Sony Michel, but let's face it, Sony Michel is good for a quarter of a football season. They do not have all of the weapons that they really need to have to make Sean McVay's offense function the way he wants to function. Look, Aaron Donald and that defensive line is absolutely phenomenal. All sorts of holes in that Ram secondary. So if that line doesn't get pressure, there are going to be issues. Look, I'm not saying the Rams are not going to make the playoffs this year. I think they're a playoff team. They're just not coming into the season, NFL executives, the third best team. Okay, moving on off of that, off of the Rams, you've got the Seattle Seahawks. Now look, the Seattle Seahawks, led by the fearless one, Pete Carroll. Look, if Pete Carroll could get away with some NCAA violations with the Seattle Seahawks, you know he'd do it. I'm just saying. So Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks, at this stage of the game, heading into this season, I do not have them as the fourth best team in the NFC. I have them as the eighth best team in the NFC. But what's interesting about this is when the season is actually over and we get into looking back at what happened in this 2021 season, we'll look back and we'll say the Seattle Seahawks entered the playoffs as the fourth or fifth best team in the NFC because it's what Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson and that GM in Seattle do. They find a way mid-season to make a push. So everybody talks about Russell Wilson being the league's most valuable player. We all talk about how Pete Carroll's the oldest coach in the National Football League, but is still one of the youngest, and how that team functions as a team. Look, Seattle is going to be there at the end of the day. They're just not there at the start of the season. I like a lot what the San Francisco 49ers are doing. I am based here in the Silicon Valley. I am actually buying into this platoon quarterback system that they'll probably rarely use, but you've really got to like what this 49er team has done on both sides of the ball. This is a vastly improved 49er team. And I will say this, and the key to the whole thing in the National Football League season is always depth. And depth on this 49er team is real. Look, I'm not talking about Tampa. I'm not talking about Green Bay, because we all know that those are two legitimate teams heading into the season. Sure, the Packers don't really play defense, but as long as Aaron Rodgers stays upright, the Packers are going to be just fine at number 2. Now we get into some of the ridiculous points of this. And I'm not even talking about the Bears being the 14th pick, the 14th ranking by these NFL executives. Have you ever noticed, too, like the NFL executives, how long does an NFL executive actually last in a gig? It's because they put out crappy lists like this. That being said, the Saints at 6. Did these NFL executives, do they actually realize that the following has happened? First, there was another hurricane in Louisiana, and the Saints are going to be displaced for a portion of the season. That's one thing. Do they also realize that the Saints no longer have Drew Brees as their starting quarterback, and their starting quarterback is going to be a guy who threw over 30 picks in his last season as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was then taken over by Tom Brady. And we all know the Cinderella story that is Tom Brady as he went on to win the Super Bowl. Look, I am just saying Jameis Winston at quarterback for this Saints is a real issue. But it's not just about Jameis Winston. There are a plethora of key injuries on the offensive side of the ball heading into this season, as well as a lack of depth at linebacker for the Saints. The Saints are not the sixth best team in the NFC heading into the start of the season. And I even question whether or not a Jameis Winston-led Sean Payton New Orleans Saints team is even going to sniff the playoffs this year. That's how bad I think the NFL executives got this thing wrong. We're going to come back to the Cowboys. Don't worry, Jerry Jones. Don't worry, Roger Staubach, Michael Irvin, all of those other Cowboy greats. We're going to come back to you in just a minute. At number 8 is my Minnesota Vikings. Now, as I've said before, I always try to stay objective when talking about my Minnesota Vikings, and I will prove it to you once again. Look, the Vikings don't deserve to be in the 8th spot in this list. They are at best a 10th place team heading into this season, maybe an 11th or 12th place team. And the reason for that is one word, and that word is depth. And you could say depth on offense, and you can say depth on defense. Look, to all the people that are going to reach out to me and complain about what I just said about the depth on offense, what did the Vikings just do this week? Let me ask you that. Irv Smith Jr. goes down for 4 or 5 weeks. Their starting tight end goes down for 4 or 5 weeks. Remember, Kyle Rudolph not on this team anymore. And they trade. they trade for a tight end from the New York Football Jets that might not have even made the 53-man roster. Look, I am just saying, you had all offseason, you had all preseason, you had all this time to have good depth in positions, and you have to make a move like that at the start of the season. That's one thing. The second thing is the depth on defense. Now, they got no pressure last year, and they still are having issues with the depth on their defensive line. If everybody starts and there are no injuries, which is never going to happen, but if that utopian type of thing happened, then the Vikings would have a great year at defense. The problem is when 2 or 3 defenders go out on their starting side, they have nothing back to replace them with. The depth on this team will be the downfall of this Viking team, which is why I have them as like the 10th or the 11th best team coming into the start of the 2021 season. All right. So now, in the interest of full disclosure, the Dallas Cowboys in at number 7. As a fan of the National Football League, like you and me and a lot of my buddies, I have to say this. I have looked at the Cowboys the last 5 years, and in the last 5 years, I've said almost every year that I think this Cowboy team has a legitimate chance at winning the Super Bowl. I have had it. Jerry Jones, Roger Staubach, all other ghosts of the Dallas Cowboys from the past, present, and future. I am not going to do it again. Because yes, once again, if you look at the roster, you look at the young players, you look at the veterans, you look at the defensive side of the ball, you look at the D-line, you look at what they've done at cornerback, at free safety, you look at the offensive line. Oh, one of the best offensive lines in the game. You look at the running back. You look at the quarterback in Dak Prescott. You look at all the wide receivers. It just all looks absolutely fantastic on paper. But the problem is, Mike McCarthy is your head coach. Mike McCarthy, as your head coach of your Dallas Cowboys, I can tell you this right now. They played in 4 preseason games. 4. Now, we all know preseason games are about evaluating individual performances. It's less about the team actually winning. In this case, though, Mike McCarthy, in 3 out of 4 of those preseason games, was actually trying to win a game against other teams that were just simply evaluating talent, including the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, look, Mike McCarthy is definitely an issue with this Cowboy team. But beyond that, I really worry about Dak Prescott, and not if Dak Prescott plays, but will Dak Prescott be able to withstand 80% of the season? And if he is, then I think this Cowboy team wins the division and makes the playoffs. Now, just remember last year, a year ago at this time, I was talking on a different show about the Dallas Cowboys going all the way to the Super Bowl. All the way to the Super Bowl. This is a team that lost their starting quarterback, had that downhill skier and Andy Dalton on the backside of Career Mountain skiing down the mountain, skiing down quickly as their backup quarterback. He did a decent job. It's not like he did an absolutely horrific job. It's just that the rest of the team wasn't as good as we thought they were going to be. They look good on paper, but they didn't look good on the field. And I'll tell you this, that is a coaching issue. that is not a general manager issue as much as it is a coaching issue. And I'm not sure I've seen enough changes in this Dallas Cowboy organization to say anything beyond that. And for them to be sitting there at 7, a team that didn't even sniff the playoffs, a team that lost the division to the Washington football team, a football team that can't even come up with a new nickname, a football team that finished last season 7-9, and then for these NFL executives to come back in the offseason and put this whole thing together and to have the Dallas Cowboys sitting there at 7, absolutely ridiculous. I am sorry, Dallas, but I am not giving you my love again this year. I just don't see it. All right. And finally, we've got to talk about this. Now, look, as a Viking fan, as I've said, I can be very objective. And when I talk about the Chicago Bears, I often talk about how much I just flat out dislike the Chicago Bears, and just being just flat out honest. Just organizationally, I flat out dislike the Chicago Bears. Sure, I love sweetness, and the Super Bowl shuffle was cute, Jim McMahon. But I have to say, like, if there's a team I dislike in the National Football League, it is the Chicago Bears. But still, when I see something that deserves credit, even if it is the Chicago Bears, I feel the need to give it to them. Look, Matt Nagy, the head coach of the Chicago Bears, what has he done in his 3 seasons as a head coach of this Chicago Bears team? What has he done to have these NFL executives have his team sitting there at 14? Let's briefly recap. Does Matt Nagy have a winning record as a head coach in the National Football League with the Chicago Bears? Yes. It's not just like one game over 500. He's like 5 or 6 games over. Matt Nagy has won. He's had the Bears in the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. This Chicago Bears team has played well under Matt Nagy. It is ridiculous for the Chicago Bears to be so far down on the list. So I wonder, why is this happening? Did the other NFL executives not pay attention to the excellent job that the team did when they drafted this year? They had one of the better drafts in the NFL this year. I'm just saying, you just watch. You watch some of the rookie players outside of Justin Fields, who we will talk about in a minute. Watch some of these other young players that they've drafted. Furthermore, they also did well in free agency and didn't lose a whole lot. I think that this Chicago Bears team is a vastly improved team over last year. Look, Matt Nagy is a couple degrees better than that old Detroit Lions football coach that the Detroit Lions fans couldn't wait to show the door to. And yes, I'm speaking of the 8-8 Wayne Fontes. So Wayne Fontes of the Detroit Lions was famous for like always having his team in and around 8-8. And I tell you what, like the Detroit Lions since Wayne Fontes have all probably wished they still had him there as their head coach. Look, where was Chicago before Matt Nagy? And where will Chicago be after Matt Nagy? I am just saying Matt Nagy's a hell of a football coach. He knows how to win, and he knows how to get a lot out of the talent that he's given. Now, what I don't understand is why the Chicago Bears would not start Justin Fields. Look, Justin Fields, not only has he played well in OTAs, not only did he play well in training camp, not only did he play well in scrimmages, not only did he play well in the actual preseason games, and not only did he do well in post-game press conferences. Justin Fields is a leader of football players. He's a lot like Russell Wilson in that respect. Russell Wilson went into Seattle and he took that franchise over day one that he entered the facility. Justin Fields has done the same thing, except their GM in Chicago has not recognized it the same way they did with Russell Wilson in Seattle. Look, I'm not one of these guys that always thinks the rookie quarterbacks need to wait. I think some rookie quarterbacks need to wait. Others don't. Justin Fields is one of those quarterbacks that deserves to be the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears this season. Look, I'm not saying that you as a Chicago Bears fan should be so stressed out. Look, Andy Dalton, as I said, skiing down the backside of Career Mountain. He's literally almost down the hill. It doesn't mean he's not a decent quarterback in his old age. It just means he's not a spectacular quarterback. He's not going to actually do the things that win the game for you. Matt Nagy will recognize this. He'll make the move soon enough. It will happen somewhere between week 2 and week 4. And the Chicago Bears will still have a legitimate chance of actually making it to the playoffs this year. And all of those NFL executives, all of those guys that had the Bears sitting at 14, a lot of them are going to be out hunting for new gigs next year. I'm just saying. All right, North America, thanks so much for tuning into the big show today. Do check out our Big Sports website when you have a chance at mighty.rip. You can also check out the Disturbance at disturbance.live. Anyways, for the Disturbance, as always, I'm Dave Tabaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sport. Wait.
The Disturbance is a production of the Mighty Rip Podcast Network. For more witty, 100% independent sports coverage, check out our big website at mighty.rip. Okay, go ahead and kill the music now.